This question is called Clover Company, and it's from the investment appraisal area of the syllabus, Syllabus D. It's focusing primarily on specific investment decisions, namely asset replacement decisions, and then in Part B, the superiority of the discounted cash flow method over non-discounted cash flow methods. It's split into 3 requirements: a calculation of equivalent annual cost in Part A, and then a discussion based on the decision needed, and then Part B, the discounted cash flows. Let's now have a look at the scenario. Clover Company is needing to replace a machine which is essential to its production process. Now, it's identified 2 alternative machines, identical capacity, different technology, and replacement cycles. The scenario will detail the initial costs, operating costs and maintenance costs, and residual values of the machines. Let's have a look at the requirement. It says calculate the equivalent annual cost of each machine's replacement cycle. That will be 10 marks. Now, as there's 2 machines, therefore you should assume it's 5 marks each. The same calculation is going to be required for both, just with different information and different years of operation. So it's important that you start with the correct layout. You can then copy it for machine 2, just adding 2 more years. Now, there's 2 ways of doing this. You could just lay it out for the years 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, or you can lay it out for years 0 to 3 and 0 to 5. I'm going to do the latter. Let's look at machine 1 first. It has an initial cost of 2 million and a 3-year replacement cycle. Residual value is 200,000. There's maintenance costs and annual operating costs. But notice they start in the first year of operation. That will be 52,000 in year 1. You're used to seeing the examiner say that 52,000 is a current cost, and therefore your first inflation would be in year 1. That's not the case in this one. You must read the information very carefully. The first year of inflation in this question will be year 2. The same applies to the operating costs, and the same applies to machine 2. Now, if you get that wrong, as long as you've laid everything out clearly for the marker, you'll only get it marked wrong in the first instance, and then method marks will happen. It's important also before you start to read all the information. Although the other information paragraph relates to the discussion element for part 2, right at the bottom, Clover Company uses a discount rate of 13% to appraise investment projects, and it says ignore taxation. That's great for us because that complicates the net present value, doesn't it? You'd have to be putting in tax benefits on the initial cost, and you'd also be having to put in tax relief on those maintenance costs and operating costs. Good news, we don't have to do that. So here is the layout for the net present value calculation for machine 1. I've scheduled out the years on the top and then scheduled out my cash flows, getting a total cash flow, the discount factors at 13%, and then below I'm going to calculate my equivalent annual cost by finding the net present value and dividing by the annuity factor. You don't need to type this out again from machine 2, just copy it and paste it below. And then just change that to say machine 2 and add 2 more years for years 4 and 5 because this is a 5-year replacement cycle. This will save you time. So I've now put in those cash flows for machine 1. Notice I've put them in as negative figures if they're an outflow, and the inflow for the residual value as a positive figure. Now the inflation starts at time 2. So simply use the cell, use the functionality of the spreadsheet. Do not go to your calculator. and then put in an absolute figure. Times the year 1 figure by 1.08 for inflation of 8% on maintenance costs. And then you can literally copy that to year 3. The formula will work. Now do the same for ops, but this time we're timesing it by 10%, so 1.1, and again copy that across. The total is now going to be the sum of the cash flows, and again copy it across. Do not type out the sum again. You can then highlight those as a bold, and now the discount factors can come from your discount tables, or you can devise them yourself from the formula. Obviously for year 0 it's 1, but for year 1 you can simply put it in as 1.13 to the power of -1. Now you can copy that across and put in to the power of -2 to the power of -3, but it might be quicker just to reference the cell and divide by 1.13. And again, you can copy that across. Those are my quick ways of doing that. You don't get rounded discount factors anymore, therefore you've got all the decimal places. We now then simply times the total cash flow by the discount factor, copy across, and now we're ready to find the net present value as the sum of those present values. And then again, you need the annuity factor for 3 years at 13%. You can again go to the tables, the annuity table here, and find it. Or you can simply derive it from the figures you've already got in your spreadsheet by summing those individual discount factors that you have already, which therefore then gives you the annuity factor of 2.36. As you can see, it's 2.36 in your tables. Now to get the equivalent annual cost, you simply take the net present value and divide by the annuity factor. That gives you an equivalent annual cost for the 3-year cycle. So highlight it for the examiner. Now you could have done the net present value by using the net present value function to find the present value of the cash flows from year 1 to 3. And no, it's an anomaly, but it doesn't actually calculate the net present value. It just calculates the present value of the cash flows from year 1 onwards. So net present value at 0.13, because that's the cost of capital we're using, highlight the cash flows from 1 to 3, and that gives you the present value of those cash flows. You need to take off the cash flow at year 0, and that will be the 2 million. And so the net present value is therefore the same figure as before, 27,68927. So you can use that way as a quick way of getting the net present value. Now I've also completed machine 2 for you, which is a 5-year cycle. Here I have copied the formulas down from machine 1 and replaced them with the information in the machine 2 paragraph, being the changes in the costs and the inflation rates. The discount factors can just be extended by using the same formula as before. And then the annuity factor needs to be for 5 years, so years 1 to 5. Now, a common error was to include that 1 in the annuity factor. That was incorrect. The annuity factor always starts at time 1. The other common error, which was from a presentational point of view, is to not have the correct column width. So numbers started to be compressed or show hashtags. It was really important that you let the examiner see your answer in a professional manner by making sure your column widths are correct and highlighting your answer. So that is part A1 for 10 marks. Now we move on to part 2, discuss which machine should be selected by Clover Company. There we now have to use the other information paragraph. And this is imperative to doing well and getting those 4 marks. That information is there for a reason. You haven't used it in part 1, so you must be using it now in the discussion. It is not going to get many marks for you to just say the financial justification, which is to go with machine 2 because of the lowest equivalent annual cost. We need 3 further points to get those 4 marks. So if you look in the other information, they're talking about the different cycles. They're talking about the residual values and talking about the different obsolescence times of the 2 machines. So there are your other 3 titles. Use the information in the scenario to gain those marks. Here I have detailed what I would have written under each of those headings. Please note I am using full sentences and not bullet points. It's really important to present it in a clear manner. Don't just put all your sentences and discussion in one cell. Notice I have moved the sentence to the lower cell, so it's clearer for the marker. This is definitely a technique you need to ensure you do if you're writing in the spreadsheet as opposed to the word processor. For these discussion points also, it's necessary for you to do more than just simply repeat what was in the scenario. You need to use the scenario, absolutely, but put it into your own words. Give it some context and implications for Clover Company. Let's look at the residual value one, for instance. Here I've said the residual value for machine 1 is confirmed as a buyback price. I have got that from the scenario, and it's just an estimate for machine 2. Therefore, it's uncertain. That's the implication, and this could affect the financial justification. But I've done some further analysis. If I change that residual value to be 0, it doesn't change the financial outcome. It's still the lowest equivalent annual cost compared to machine 1. 1172 and 1060. So you need to say that. And so I've said, even if 0, it does not change the lowest equivalent annual cost. Also remember, spelling and grammar mistakes are ignored. Now, further examples of these techniques are in previously published questions, just to prove that things do get repeated if you practice. So the questions were Caberas from March-June 21, Crockett Company September-December 2020, and Melanie Company from September-December 2018. So practice pays off.